Good morning, good afternoon, or good evening, and welcome to this project management tool video. And we're going to be looking at the work breakdown structure, the WBS, and some of the challenges that we can all face when we try to put it into practice. So that's why it's called scope planning versus reality. Okay, so let's start by just reminding ourselves what it is. Well, we know that the work breakdown structure is a useful tool. It focuses on the deliverables of the project, and it's a whole scope, so it has to be comprehensive and detailed. So the idea is that it covers all the work of the project, every activity, every task. And think about it this way. If you haven't got a comprehensive and detailed or decomposed idea of all the work of the project, how can you sequence? How can you schedule? How can you budget? And the reality is that if you don't have this idea of all of the work of the project in detail and comprehensive, so it covers the direct work and the indirect work, the reality is that you can't do accurate budgets or accurate schedules. So, and we can see in the slide, we can actually see, where the work breakdown structure comes. It's here at the beginning, and I think it's worth mentioning that actually, if you've got a good work breakdown structure, then many of your other subsequent plans, a monitoring plan, for example, a communications plan, even a recruitment plan, 90% of it has been done for you. So it's a useful tool, it's helpful, and it's worth mentioning, I think, that in every PMD Pro course that I have seen, this is one of the tools that people always flag up as being really helpful. Okay, and then a quick reminder, how do we do it? Well, typically, we make a link to our log frame, we look at the output, and then we go down from there. So we say, well, what activities do we need to do if we want to achieve these outputs, and so on. Breaking down, being more detailed, more decomposing, and not forgetting the indirect work. So that's the work of the support services, logistics, supply chain management, communications, funding, fundraising. I always think the project management is too important to leave to the project staff. So we've got to get all of these voices together, and then we can have this really useful, comprehensive, and decomposed plan. And so if we do this, well, then we can end up with something that looks a little bit like this. And this is an example developed by some PMD Pro participants in installing an audit system. So it's comprehensive, it's got all the work, it's detailed, etc., etc. But what challenges, what difficulties have you faced as you try to put this into practice? And let's stop just for a moment and think about this. If you're watching this video with a group, again, just stop for a moment, have a think about it, and just brainstorm, what are the sorts of problems that you've come across, and then just carry on. And so hopefully you've come up with some, or all of these, or maybe more of them, but let's just talk through them. Time is the first. Look, clearly it takes a long time to do this. If we want this comprehensive and detailed view of the whole project, it's not going to be quick. And it's easy to say plan your planning, but reality can be a little bit different. Sometimes we don't have very much time. Maybe the implementation plan has already been given to you. It's part of the proposal. Maybe you weren't even involved with writing it. Sometimes a similar problem that we can see that comes out of both of these and the next one, which is the pressure to implement, is that as you start doing a work breakdown structure, you realize that things are being delayed, and then people are getting upset with you and they say, no, we've just got to get on, got to start. So there can be a lot of time pressures here. But at the same time, an equivalent one, we've just said we need to have all of these different voices, but what about if they're not there? You've only got one logistics manager, and she or he, simply is not available at that moment. or you haven't got all the project stuff. So, this is another problem. We've said it's important, but maybe they're not all there, especially when we look at the time pressure that we've got to do this. And then another challenge I don't think we look at enough is that, a work breakdown structure, let's think about it, comprehensive and decomposed for the whole project. And our project is for 5 years. It's a large project. It's working in different areas. It's going to be an enormous document. It's just going to be huge. And so I think that's why scale, size, and complexity is mentioned here, because I think it's quite easy to foresee that this might get quite unwieldy. And so there's also an assumption that we have a perfect view of the future. I struggle to see how one can do a detailed and comprehensive work breakdown structure for what's happening in 5 years' time. Next month, sure, no problem at all. But 5 years or 2 years, even next year, how realistic is it? So I think, that this is where reality starts to bite. So lots of ways of dealing with it, and clearly, as part of adaptation, you're going to have to think about what works best for you. But have a look at this. So what happens if instead of starting with the output from our log frame, we start with something which, like this. I've got transport refugees from border to the rest station. Now, transporting the refugees or ex-refugees transported, whatever. This could be a deliverable. It's very unlikely to be a higher level output or anything like this in the project. So we have something like this, and I'd like you to think about this either with your colleagues or individually. How would you break this down? What are the sorts of activities, sub-activities, tasks, and subtasks if you wanted to achieve this successfully? So have a look at that, and then when you've had a chance to brainstorm this, then you can carry on. And you may well have come up with something that looks a little bit like this. Now, clearly, this is simply showing one route. We've got a lot of some of it is unloading people, preparing trucks, refugees, putting special cases in a cab, whatever. I mean, we've got a list of activities, sub-activities, and tasks here. So it's very detailed, but it's also covering the direct and the indirect work, collecting and counting travel tokens, preparing trucks, checking numbers, completing the manifest. So I think this is something that's a different approach, and something that you can do. One way to do this is to think about the project in terms of phases. Now, I know we start to do this already, and we have a phase model in PMD Pro, but we can break implementation down into more phases, or we can think of some of the phases by themselves. So immediately you say, well, how long is phase 1 or phase 2? Well, it depends on your project. In a humanitarian response project, phase 1 might be a couple of days. It might be a couple of months. It could be a quarter. It depends on your project. 6 months, 1 quarter, 1 month, a few days. You need to determine what is the most appropriate phase structure for your project. And it won't be static. It will change. Maybe some phases are shorter than others. Depends what activity is being done. And I've deliberately put in 3 different work breakdown structure images here. Don't worry, they're very small. They're not designed to be read, just to illustrate the point that the work breakdown structure, you could do your specific work breakdown structure for each phase. And it will be different. And that's good, because it means that we're thinking about how to make the work breakdown structure work for the phase. And we're starting with our deliverables in the phase, and instead of our outputs, we're starting with our deliverables, and we're breaking down from there. So we're saying, well, okay, maybe we've got a high-level work breakdown structure for the whole project, but let's go phase by phase. Let's take our key deliverables and produce a comprehensive and detailed or decomposed work breakdown structure just for the phase. And that is one way that we can make the work breakdown structure much more manageable, much more helpful, and possibly a lot more useful as well. Because what we don't want are documents that are big and unwieldy and as a consequence never get used. We want something that helps the implementers to do their work. And so at that point, I think it's a moment for you to think about what you could do to adapt the work breakdown structure for your environment. What would the phases be? Would you look at the deliverables, or would you still focus on the outputs? Would you have a high-level work breakdown structure at the beginning? And if so, how detailed would it be? As you move into other phases of the project, such as the transition phase, would you have a work breakdown structure for that? How would you put it into operation? How would this link to your governance structure? Would you present the work breakdown structure at a board meeting, around a decision gate possibly? What are the ways that you have to make this work for you in your context? And at that, I'd just like you to thank you for viewing the video, and good luck in making scope planning work for you.